All right, everybody. I hope you are enjoying your snow day. You got lucky on that one. I guess the Mr. Demers guaranteed no snow day does not mean what it used to be because weathermen are terrible. What we're going to do today is just watch a couple slides on an introduction to the historical origins of Islam in the Arabian Peninsula. And then when we get back, we'll talk about the actual teachings of Islam. So I'll try to keep this pretty short with just a couple questions. What I also want you to do is to read sections 1 and 2. Section 2 of chapter 10, I want you to read only up to the Sunni Shia split in Islam. So, sections 1 and part of section 2 of chapter 10. Please read those as well whenever you get a chance. So, anyhow, Islam is one of the three great major monotheistic religions on the planet, and it's a relatively young religion compared to Judaism and certainly Christianity. Judaism being the oldest, obviously going back to the times of Abram or Abraham. Christianity coming during the Roman Empire, and Islam only coming around the 8th century AD, so almost 600 years after the death or the birth of Christ, I should say. When we think about Islam, we have to look at a map of the Arabian Peninsula. So, to put this in perspective, Jerusalem's up here. The east that we've been looking at a lot, you see a little bit of Greece down here, the Eastern Mediterranean, you got Egypt here, Damascus, a great Christian city we talked about here, Mesopotamia here, the old Persian Empire over here. So, you have this giant peninsula called Arabia, separated from Africa by the Red Sea. And this is going to be the birthplace of Islam. Very inhospitable area, not a lot of water, and it's made of a bunch of tribes initially, people we call Bedouins, just tribal people, nomads, if you will, who go around and trade with one another. The two important cities we're going to talk about are Mecca and later Medina. Mecca is going to be kind of the great trade center of this peninsula, and it's where a lot of these tribes are going to come to trade and hear news, and there's going to be trade routes all around this region, so there's going to be a large exchange of ideas. And we'll kind of see that also too when we look at the life of Muhammad, the city of Medina, or formerly known as Yathrib, will also be important too. This map also notes you at the death of the Prophet Muhammad, these were the lands controlled by Islamic forces, but we'll get to that later. Really, you want to understand this peninsula here is the important area where Islam is going to be born, and your other major religions of monotheism are going to be more based up here, obviously Jerusalem, with their origins, as we saw with Abraham over here in the Fertile Crescent and the Mesopotamian region. Now, it's interesting to note, though, that all the three major monotheistic religions do basically, if you think about it, develop in the same area. And we'll see that Islam definitely kind of grows in the context of Judaism and Christianity. So I'm just going to get through the historical content of Islam. Number one, the geography of Arabia is really important to understand the type of life that the Prophet Muhammad comes from. As I said, it's part of southwestern Asia on that peninsula. It's mostly a desert region, and it's dotted with little small fertile areas we call oases. And these places are what these tribes are going to kind of fight over, land and water, which are both scarce resources in this area. Mostly inhospitable desert. The camel is super important because the camel and its domestication allows these traders and tribesmen to move throughout the desert for long distances without needing to give their camels water. So the camel caravan, or group of camels used to trade goods all around the peninsula, is extremely important to the life of these Bedouins. As I said, water is extremely rare and a vital resource. And so basically you break these people down into a bunch of nomadic Bedouins. Again, think of them as more like different clans or tribes. And they're going to all kind of trade and fight and exchange ideas. And that's kind of the life that the Prophet Muhammad will grow up into. You do have some cities, most notably Mecca, where some people would live there, but mostly life revolves around these caravans going across the desert, just like ships would go across the ocean to go trade goods with other far off places like North Africa, the Middle East, even up into Asia Minor, and even into the east of Asia. Mecca is kind of the center of where the story begins because, like I said, it almost serves as like this giant central area where all these different traders and Bedouins would come and meet. And also, it's their religious center because in the center of the city of Mecca is this giant box like building called the Kaaba, which literally means the square. It's a big box. And in there, initially, all the different tribes would put statues of all their different gods and goddesses. The Kaaba is going to be important, though, in Islam today. And the story really begins in the 7th century, in the 600s, when a caravan trader whose name is Muhammad decides to move away from the polytheistic religion of most Bedouins and make his own monotheistic religion. So that's what we're going to look at. We're going to his story today. So, who is this guy, Muhammad? Well, he's a real person, and he obviously is part of a tribe of Bedouins. We think he's born in Mecca around 570 AD. So, to put that in perspective, right around the time of Justinian and the height of the Byzantine Empire that's going on to the that we just talked about, also about 570 years after the birth of Christ. We do know that he's orphaned at a young age. His father and mother both die, and he actually gets raised in the tribe of his father, his uncle's tribe of Bedouins in the Arabian desert. So he's out there in the desert with these people, coming back to Mecca every now and again. As far as we know, he's kind of an outsider because his parents have both died. We don't know too much about him, but we do know that he definitely is part of the tribe, but not well accepted. At the age of 25, his fortunes turn. He had gotten a job as a leader of a caravan for a wealthy family, and he would lead these caravans up to Jerusalem, all over the place. We know he's definitely getting involved, or at least exposure to, is Judaism, Christianity, etc. And we know that eventually he actually marries the widow who had inherited this company. Her name is Khadijah, and she is much older than him. But overnight, he becomes an economic success because he marries this woman. As far as we know, he did love her, by the way. In that he usually in this tradition they would take many wives. He only, while she's alive, only keeps her as his wife, even though she's substantially older than he is. So I'm not thinking he's too much of a gold digger, but I'm sure the money helped out a lot. So life goes on for him. He becomes very well respected in the community. He has some daughters. He's just living the life. But he always found that he wasn't at peace with himself. He would always search for truth. He just felt like he wasn't fulfilled spiritually. So he would like to like climb up into the mountains outside of Mecca, and he would just go and like meditate, sit there. Kind of like some people like to go out and camp in the woods for a while, kind of get to be one with nature. He would do that same thing. So at the age of 40, he's up in his little cave on the weekend or whatever, and he's just sitting there, and all of a sudden, according to Muhammad, all the lights go out, the fire goes out, he's in darkness, the wind's howling, and all of a sudden, the angel Gabriel, who we should know, same angel that shows up to Mary and says, "Do not be afraid, you're going to be the mother of Jesus." This is where these are all connected. Shows up and tells Muhammad that God, or in Arabic, Allah, which simply means the one up high, has chosen him to be his prophet and to continue the message that had been spread by Jesus and spread by Abraham, and to bring it into its true form to the people. So Muhammad leaves the mountain and eventually goes and literally goes to bed for like a week. He's so scared. He's so scared to have to go preach the word of Allah. He's like, what is going on here? Eventually, his wife Khadijah encourages him to preach and to go to all these polytheistic people in Mecca and preach that there is only one God, the God of Abraham, the God of Jesus. It's all the same God, but that Muhammad has been chosen as his most important prophet to bring his true intentions. Okay, so they're going to say that Jesus is a prophet. He's not God. He's a prophet, but Muhammad's an even better prophet. He's the last prophet who's bringing you the exact word of God. And think about this: you have this rich businessman who's going to give up everything to sit down by the Kaaba in the market and tell everybody that their religion's stupid and that there's one God and that he is that God's prophet and that they need to start treating poor people with dignity. They need to give their wealth away. They need to stop worshiping all those gods they've worshipped for generations. That's not going to go over too well. I mean, imagine if you went to the cafeteria and started yelling at everybody that their Christian Catholic beliefs are wrong. You've been spoken to by God. God has told you that this is a completely different religion. Here we see some images. Here's an image of the angel Gabriel talking to Muhammad. Now, this would be very rare in the Islamic world. Usually, in pictures of Muhammad, they don't show his face because he's so important. And here is the Kaaba in its state now in the center of Mecca, where it has become the ground zero for Islam. We'll talk about the importance of the Kaaba in Islamic faith when we get to looking at the beliefs of Muhammad. So obviously, preaching all these things is not going to go too well for Muhammad. Obviously, many Arabs are going to be furious at him for trying to replace their gods. And while his wife and his uncle are alive, they protect him. But once they both die, all of these business leaders try to kill Muhammad. They want to kill him and his followers. He's too much. Like all those people who always preach, different things. Jesus, he would say Socrates. People don't like you taking on the status quo. So Muhammad and his followers actually flee Mecca in 622 AD, and they go on what's known as the Hijra or the journey, and they're actually going to go to the north where he'd been invited by a group of people who had kind of liked what he was preaching in a town called Yathrib. They invite him and his followers to go and to set up a theocracy based off of his beliefs, Islam, which means to surrender to God, Islam. They bring him to Yathrib and say, "We want you to run our show and get out of Mecca, and we want you to lead us according to you being the prophet." We call this journey in 622 AD the Hijra. This is the first year of the Islamic calendar. Okay? And then what happens is people like what he's preaching. He's preaching a lot of the same things Jesus will preach. He's preaching that, or Jesus did preach, he's preaching that the poor must be respected, that the rich need to serve the poor, social justice aspects, things like that, that obviously the people in charge don't like. And we actually end up changing the name of Yathrib once he starts running it to the city of Medina, which is known as the city of the prophet. So the second most important city in the Islamic world. What happens then is going to be a giant war between the Muslims and the Meccans, the people from Mecca. They're going to fight a lot of battles. And this is where in the Quran we're going to see that there are a lot of violent aspects of the Quran. And that's because when they're being written from the words of Muhammad, we're going to see that he's in the middle of a war. And those can be misinterpreted. We're going to talk a lot about how all of this plays into the beliefs of Islam, into some people being able to radicalize it into violence. But that's another story. It's better we had that discussion in class. So here we're just concerned about the history. In 630 AD, the Muslims are victorious, and Muhammad will enter the city of Mecca. He will ride around the Kaaba 6 times. He will enter the Kaaba. He will take a staff and he will break all the idols inside. And he will say, "There is only one God, and that God is Allah, and I am his prophet." And this is the beginnings of Islam as not just a social, religious, but also a political entity, as he now controls all this territory. So he again destroys Al Kaaba. Islam will now begin to spread. Okay, and Muhammad is just a man. In 632, he dies of a high fever, and Islam will continue to spread, being led by its followers. Okay, being led by his followers, and his words and prophecies will be written down by his followers, and they will become the basis of the holiest book of Islam, known as the Quran. And that's about where we'll leave it off for today. That's plenty for you to know, historically speaking. I can answer any questions we have in class. But again, go outside, play in the snow, take a nap. I don't know, do whatever. Once you get this done, hopefully your other work isn't too much and you do enjoy part of this glorious snow day. Hopefully we have no more because I don't want to see you people any longer than I have to this year. All right, have a great day. That was a joke, by the way. And I will see everybody on Friday. Great.